The African Continental Free Trade Area is a flagship project of the African Union's Agenda 2063, which is a blueprint for attaining inclusive and sustainable development across the continent over the next 50 years. The agreement has been signed by member states of the African Union, bringing together 1.2 billion people with a combined GDP of more than $2 trillion. In this podcast, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the CFTA and discuss what it's all about. Before I do that, perhaps it's important to begin by discussing what exactly economic integration is and why it's important for a country such as Zambia. Or simply put, economic integration is two or more countries working together for their joint economic benefit. Economic integration can create and provide access to larger markets as well as increase the competitiveness of African products. It also makes it easier to trade goods as barriers between countries are increasingly removed. Furthermore, it can provide access to new technology and skills transfer. And lastly, it can aid in the coordination of infrastructure development with neighboring countries. A good and recent example of this is the Chisengele Bridge, which was a joint venture between Botswana and Zambia. Economic integration could be seen as the foundation from which that infrastructure could be developed. Well, with that background in mind, let's look at what exactly the CFTA is. From a historical perspective, the CFTA is the culmination of years of effort to see the continent integrate economically. Beginning all the way back in 1963, the Organization of African Unity was founded in an effort to coordinate and harmonize policy in the field of economics among member states. Along the way, Africa has witnessed differing initiatives such as the Lagos Plan of Action in the 80s, the Abuja Treaty in the 90s, the different regional economic communities we know today such as SADC, the EAC and ECOWAS, the Tripartite Free Trade Area in 2015, and now the CFTA. If you trace a line through all of these different initiatives, it becomes clear that they've all been concerned with ultimately attaining continent-wide economic integration. The CFTA is really the culmination of that hope. The agreement itself, which established the CFTA, was presented to African leaders for signature on the 21st of March 2018 in Kigali, Rwanda. The primary objective of the CFTA is to create a single market for goods and services, which also allows for the free movement of business and natural persons right across Africa. The Economic Commission for Africa suggests that the CFTA has the potential to boost intra-African trade by 52.3% through the elimination of import duties, and to double this amount if non-tariff barriers are also reduced. Beyond that primary objective, to create a single market for goods and services, the CFTA also seeks to promote sustainable and inclusive socio-economic development as well as gender equality. It also seeks to enhance the competitiveness of African economies, to promote industrial development, to promote regional value chain development, to promote agricultural development, and to promote food security. Lastly, it seeks to resolve the challenges of multiple and overlapping memberships. The CFTA is going to bring together all 55 member states of the African Union, and as previously mentioned, that covers a market of more than 1.2 billion people. Just to put that into perspective, the CFTA will be the world's largest free trade area since the formation of the World Trade Organization. Well, considering that the agreement is all about trade, when was trade supposed to begin? Trade under the agreement can only technically begin once all the required legal instruments are in place. However, African Union heads of state and government decided to launch trade on the 1st of January 2021, despite the fact that tariff schedules and rules of origin were not finalized. These important negotiations on tariffs and the rules of origin are expected to be completed by the end of June 2021. Interestingly, just a few weeks ago, the first CFTA Secretary General, Wamukele Mene, was in Zambia, and he revealed that Zambia is the only country that has submitted trade in goods and trade in services offers to the CFTA. Well, what else is going to need to be in place as countries prepare to trade under this agreement? There are various domestic processes which must take place, including the updating of tariff books, gazetting changes to customs legislation, and ensuring that the necessary documentation requirements and processes are in place. In the meantime, the majority of African countries will continue to trade with one another through their other trade agreements, such as the SADC Protocol on Trade. In terms of the progress of ratification of the agreement, 36 countries have ratified it. That means that they've officially made the agreement valid or given formal consent to their participation. Zambia's instrument of ratification was deposited with the African Union chairperson on the 5th of February 2021. As we now consider Zambia, there are at least 3 things that the country can do to position itself well to ensure that it reaps the maximum benefits from the CFTA. Firstly, the government should focus its efforts on raising awareness about how the agreement can benefit Zambian producers and business owners. They must also be made aware of what risks come with it. They're especially going to need to be prepared for the increase in competition that will arise once tariffs are removed and trade under the agreement begins. This kind of support would ensure that Zambian producers and businesses are not crowded out by firms from countries with larger economies such as South Africa and Nigeria. Support is especially going to need to be provided for small-scale producers in order to avoid crowding out in a market which will be run by the private sector. This support can take the form of enhanced technical, managerial, and financial skills to meet industry standards. In the second place, Zambia should focus on building its manufacturing sector. Currently, the primary industry remains the most important one, with agriculture and mining making the most significant contributions to GDP. The implication of a small manufacturing sector for the CFTA is that there will be low trade in finished goods, which will limit the scope for intra-regional trade. The Zambian government should be urged to identify the companies involved in the manufacturing sector, such as African Milling, Zambeef, and Trade Kings, and provide support for them, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, because they will play an important role in boosting interregional trade once it begins. Thirdly, Zambia should also work at identifying the product and commodity categories in which we have comparative advantage. That is, the ability to carry out an economic activity more efficiently than any other activity. These are the goods that the country must now focus on producing once trade in the CFTA begins to take place. Furthermore, by identifying the categories in which we have comparative advantage, it can be determined which countries we share those comparative advantages with, and those represent opportunities for joint production among member states and sectors for product development. Well, this was just a brief introduction to the CFTA. For further information, I encourage you to visit the PMRC website www.pmrczambia.com in order to download one of our publications titled The CFTA, What's in it for Zambia. Thank you for listening.